Yay! So it's the day before Thanksgiving. And it's different this year. Yada yada. So let's just have a little chat while I peel some potatoes, okay? So I have family from out of state that come in for Thanksgiving to visit. They're not believers in Christ. Pretty worldly. Yada yada. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. My grandma is 98. That's a really blessed thing to have my grandma still around at 98. Her mother lived to be 103. My great-grandma died when I was 18. So I got to know my great-grandma pretty well. And now my daughter has the opportunity to know her great-grandma and remember her. So, I have family from out of state who were planning on coming in, but were not planning on coming in. We weren't sure. Come to find out today, they did come into town. My parents and my family and I had already made plans to be together on Thanksgiving because we know our relatives are living in fear. They live in fear about this stuff. They live in fear about it affecting my grandma. I haven't seen my grandma since August. My relatives from out of state did come into town. Did I say that already? And they're able to see my grandma. They're over there. That's where we usually have Thanksgiving, is at my aunt's house. So my relatives came in from out of state, are able to see my grandma. And my part of the family was not invited. I'm not sure why. But again, living in fear. So not only do we not get to see my 98-year-old grandma, not only does my daughter not to get to see her great-grandma, probably not for Christmas either, but now we're picking and choosing which relatives get to see my grandma. And my other relatives, I want to see them too. On top of they want certain things worn and done if we did come into the house. But my parents and I and my husband don't want to do that. So now we're stuck dropping off my grandma's gifts and cards at the front door and blowing her kisses through the front door tomorrow. My family, my relatives, my aunts, they're smart people. They're intellectual people. My one relative is a lawyer. My other relative is a successful businessman. My other relatives are smart, mathematically, scientifically, well-read people. Okay, you get my point? They have education. But for one, they're reading the wrong things, like the New York Times and all that stuff. They're reading the wrong science journals, that's for sure. And now we're being ostracized for whatever reason. Now, wouldn't it make sense to you, two things. Wouldn't it make sense to you that out-of-state relatives would cause more of a risk, if there even was a risk, to my grandma's health than we who live in the same state? Just saying. My other relatives work at jobs where they see multiple people multiple times a day. I work at a job where I see the same children and the same coworkers every day. Every single day. And So that part doesn't make sense. The other part I was thinking that doesn't make sense is my grandma was born in 1922. That's the time when the Spanish flu was out. One, my grandma survived all that. My grandma survived scarlet fever, got through the Great Depression. Back to me knowing my great-grandma. We used to talk to my great-grandma about stuff, the past, what it was like, what life was like, what she did back in the early 1900s and the 20s and the 30s. We talked to my grandma about the 30s and 40s. My great-grandma never mentioned how horrible and bad and disastrous the Spanish flu was, ever. Now, granted, I knew her when she was in her 90s and 100s, but she was a clear-thinking elder. She didn't go senile. Her whole 103 years, she never went senile. She might have been forgetful. She never talked about the ravages of the Spanish flu. Just like so many of us will not talk about the ravages of the flu. You know what I'm talking about right now. We won't, because there's not. My great-grandparents and grandma, my great-grandma and my grandma talked a lot about the Depression and how poor they were and how they had oranges and apples for breakfast for Christmas, and that was a luxury. My grandma talked about how she had one dress for every day and I think one dress for Sunday and one pair of shoes. But they did not talk about the ravages of the Spanish flu when, guess what, they wore face coverings. I've seen pictures. We were never taught about the Spanish flu, maybe on purpose, huh? So that we'd forget what they did. They did back then. Because really now, my grandma's generation is dying. And we don't have anyone else to tell us about those things that happened and what it was really like. Sorry if I'm shaking. I'm like, mash these potatoes with my bare hands because it's so frustrating. Anyways, just keep praying because Yahweh has a plan. And you know what? We have to love family. I love my family. But this is just plain mean. Picking and choosing who gets to see whom in the family. My daughter's the only great-grandchild on that side of the family. I don't want to dampen anybody's family get-togethers or anything because mine are dampened. Man, if you have your elders in your family with you, hug them and kiss them if you are able. Because some of us are not. Anyway. Bye.